my whole thing, whether it's whatever I do, especially with intuition, with writing, whatever, it's always to empower people to realize that, they've got that within them. And I'm just kind of a catalyst for bringing that stuff out. I'm empowering people. I'm not, I've noticed that sometimes people get frustrated whenever they have done some of the writing workshops or intuition workshops with me because they're very experiential, and I'll give them, I'll like lead them into the experience, and then they'll say, well, what do I write about? And they will say, well, just listen to what's coming through. Just tune in and you're going to know.
That's the whole point here, right? Right, people.
Exactly. But some people, just don't get that whole, well, can I just follow somebody? Just tell me what to do. And I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that. And it's the same with the intuitive sessions, it's, there are people who, they want fortune tellers, oh, this is going to happen in your future. And what happens with me is I just pick up the intuitive impressions. It's not even my opinion. It's not my personal experience. I just get the information. It's direct. And I say, this is what's there. And I don't tell them what to do. It's like a newspaper, you get the information and then they have to run with it after.
Exactly. You empower them. That's wonderful. We're going to talk about that. So let's get into it because we're already talking about some good stuff.
Yep.
Welcome to the Out on a Limb podcast. We are all interconnected to a greater web of consciousness. Our aim is to open your mind to a new world through having open-minded discussions about what we perceive our reality to be.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Out on a Limb podcast with your hosts Will and Allison and Samantha, and a special guest today, Debra Moffitt. And let me tell you a little bit about her, and then I'll tell you why she's so special to me. Debra Moffitt is an award-winning author and publisher, an intuitive, a podcast host, and a coach. Her mind, body, spirit articles and essays and stories appear in publications around the globe. She has spent over 15 years practicing meditation, working with dreams, and exploring spiritual practices from wisdom traditions all around the world. Her fiction was broadcast by BBC World Services Radio. She also loves to support writers in creating their own books and using her intuition to guide the process. So welcome, Debra.
Thank you. It's so wonderful to be with you again, Allison, since we met before. Yeah,
I just have to tell the audience why you are so special to me, because I had contemplated really writing a book all my life. I knew in middle school I was going to write a book. I just didn't know what it was going to be about. And I don't know, around 2017, 2018-ish, I came across Debra. At one point you had lived here in Charleston, and for some reason your name is still well known around here. But I had heard about you, went to your website, and at that time you were offering 30-minute intuitive sessions to guide writers. And I still, at that point, I don't think I knew what I wanted to write about. And just in talking to Debra, she pulled out of me this whole idea about my Christian background and how I was moving away from that and had gravitated into a greater metaphysical understanding. And partly was your intuition in our conversation that narrowed down the focus of the book. Subsequently, I think a year or two later, it was published. You guided me a little bit about how to find a publisher, and it was just a blessing. And I'll tell you, it was this interesting story, and then I'm going to let Debra talk. But during that conversation, at some point, Debra was already operating. You were doing a podcast on Unity Worldwide Radio, which was fantastic, and I was excited about that. You had big name guests on there. I mean, big names, Dispenza and Greg Braden, all these people. So she says to me, Debra says to me at the end of our conversation, this is a really important topic. There are a lot of Christians who are moving into, less dogma and more of an understanding of metaphysical practices. Why don't I have you on my radio show? And I'm like, sure, I'd love that. And deep inside, I'm like, yeah, right. She's got all these big names. She is never going to have me on the show. She's just being nice. Literally 4 days later, she calls me and she goes, my Tuesday person canceled. Can you get on the show? I'm like, what are you talking about? 4 days later, I didn't even have a website. I had nothing.
In 4 days,
I stood up an author website.
I had to stand up Allison's website, get content put in there to make it look like it was an established website, the whole bit. So yeah.
It was amazing. And so I was on that show. You graciously had me on there. It was a pretty big hit, if I recall.
Mhm.
because there were so many people who were seeking and were interested in this conversation. But it was my coming out. I was scared to death. I don't even know if you remember any of this, but it
I
was
do. Of course I do.
monumental in my trajectory, and it's been gangbusters since that. And I really credit you with that. Thank you, Deborah.
Oh, my pleasure. That is so rewarding to hear that that was sort of a catalyst for you. Very, very happy for you.
Oh my gosh, it was. So I know personally that you were also raised because you did the foreword for that book, The Journey Within. Thank you again. And so I know that you were also raised with a Christian upbringing. Tell me about that. And at what point did your journey kind of switch over to more of a metaphysical or spiritual understanding, I should say?
Yeah, I think I grew up in an extremely fundamentalist. I'm going to switch to English from French and Italian. I grew up in an extremely fundamentalist uh, family, and the whole area where I was at in that whole part of the country, and part of me always knew that there was something off when I would go to church and hear people say, you're going to burn in hell, and feeling just the judgmental aspect. And, as a child, there would be the aspect of me who would say, well, God's not judgmental. This is not the God that I know. This doesn't make sense to me. I mean, you guys already know all this stuff. And when I was a teenager, it was, I just knew that I was not going to subject myself to that anymore. That whole thing, you're going to burn in hell, and the whole playing on fear to try to get people to do the right thing. That just doesn't work. It's just kind of ridiculous. Now it's ridiculous. Then it was, I was a teenager, and it contributed to confusion and sort of chaotic thought processes and condemnation and self-doubt. And I remember at one point, whenever I was probably 14 and a half, going on 15, I was right around 15, after another one of these fire where you're going to burn in hell sermons, I went home and, I'd been searching all along. I've been reading, imagine a small town in Indiana reading about Zen Buddhism and reading Gandhi's nonviolence. I mean, I was reading all this stuff, not even 15 yet. And one morning, this is not to be judgmental about my parents, but there were some, I'm sharing this because it may be beneficial for other people to hear common, maybe have some common background with them. One morning, it's a Sunday morning, we're supposed to get ready to go to church. Of course, you have to dress in a certain way. And I decided, it was my passive resistance. I think it's probably Gandhi influence there. I said, I knew I was not going to go. It was like it was not serving my soul purpose, not serving my soul, and not in alignment with what I knew about spirituality and the nature of the all that is, right? And I sat in my bedroom writing. I've always been writing, even as a child. And at one point, my mom came in and she said, you need to get ready for church. And I said, I'm not going to go to church. And she went and got my dad, expecting he was going to beat me like he usually did. And, dad came in and he says, come on, get ready. Got to go for church. Got to get ready for church. And I said, I'm not going to go to church. And mom said, well, what's going on? And I said, well, I don't believe in that. And or dad, I guess it was dad said that. And my mom said, well, you're going to burn in hell. And I said, no, I'm not. I don't believe in hell. Not the kind of hell you're talking about, And I think they were just stunned, and they knew that they couldn't force me, and they just left me. And that was the last time I went to a fundamentalist church. And that was the big shift, And I continued my spiritual path. I had an ulcer at about 15 and a half, also, around the same time. And this is another spiritual, intuitive thing that's connected to that. There was quite a large ulcer in my stomach. It was on x-rays, and the doctor didn't tell me, but gave me sedatives. And I was a very good student, and I went to school taking sedatives, not knowing they were sedatives, walking like 2 feet above the ground, because you can't, what what's going on here? So I threw out the meds and I said, it was my mind that caused this. My mind's going to get rid of it. And I started meditation, at 15 and a half. There was nobody in my family who did meditation. Um, and I know now, and I think I knew then as well, that I have had many lifetimes where I knew how to meditate. I see myself, I know because I see now the past experiences where I was in, these Tibetan monasteries, long hours of meditation. And so within about 3 weeks, I had another checkup and the ulcer was gone.
Wow.
Wow.
I love that.
And so that was kind of the big shift there. And, and I knew that there was something more. And a lot of it, Awaken the World talks about that. My book, Awaken the World, talks about the process of looking for those spiritual practices, not religion, spiritual practices that bring us the wisdom and the tools to be able to connect with our own inner guidance systems. And so that's what intuition is about. So
Man, what a beautiful story on so many levels. And you're right. Some of those spiritual practices can be from a Christian religion or a Buddhist religion or whatever, but it's
Definitely.
about breaking the dogma down and looking at the practices individually.
Right.
And I love what it's about courage. One of the things that I write a lot about in The Journey Within and in other writings is the courage. It's not about being disagreeable or combative with your parents or whatever
or
argument.
even judgmental, because it's right for some people to have that experience. It just was not right for me.
That's right.
Correct. And so to have the courage of your conviction, whatever that is.
Especially at that age.
Right.
Yes, I was going to say that age has a big part to play in it because sure, in the teenage years, we're all a bit defiant to our parents, but it's not because we're steadfast in our convictions. We're just being,
Right.
we're just
Right.
being
To know the difference is important.
right,
Yeah.
right.
But you're just to clear it up, you're coming to us from the Swiss Alps. You have spent a whole lot of time in Europe and France, particularly. And so you speak Italian, you said, and French and English. That's what you were alluding to earlier.
They all say here I speak American, so that's why I say my English is rough. It's not quite the same, right?
Right.
So
right.
what drew you there? You said you went to university overseas. What drew you?
So, it's an interesting question. I always knew I was supposed to go to France. It was like this inner knowing, and I organized my own. I didn't do a U.S. program. I organized my own program with a French university at the University of Nice, and which was really cool because I've always been in very international milieux, very international groups, and in that French for Foreigners that I did with at the university, there were Japanese, Swiss Italian, Swiss German. There were Scandinavians, Swedish, Norwegians. They were all languages, and often we had to speak French to be able to communicate. So that was, I love languages, and I knew that France was part of my path, and consequently, I met a number of people who I had past life, I remembered past life experiences with them, and we had things to resolve. And much of my life journey has been about meeting those people, supporting people, but also resolving a lot of past karma. So a lot of that's done. So I'm finished with that part. But the cool part is I would remember and I would see the past life experiences where we had met.
Wow.
That is neat that you were so tapped in and aware so young. I mean, that's really neat. Sometimes we wish that we had kind of awakened earlier when our children were young and could tell us their past life experiences, or we would have taken it more seriously. But, everybody, the path is perfect the way it is. I understand that now, but it's neat that you were so aware so young.
So I'm just curious, when you would meet some of these individuals, was it that you would go home, you would meditate, and you would understand the connection, or was it you would meet them and it would just start playing out?
So I would say all of the above. Can I say that?
Okay. It was different
So,
circumstances.
yeah. So what I tell people often, because people are often curious about how do I know if I'm meeting somebody from a past life experience, and very often there's a very strong charge, whether it's just so there's often a difference between an energetic charge and an emotional charge, but often it's both of those together. And so you might meet somebody, you can meet thousands of people and it just be like, oh, there's, that's a nice person, but there's a charge to it where there's something, a little bit more and there's more density to it. So if you're conscious, you can pay attention to that and start to unfold what's there. And it's not always easy because we're not always allowed to see the past life experiences until after the experience or until part of the way through the experience. So it's really, really interesting. I mean, we don't get to see everything when we want to see it. So that's, you guys know that as well. So it's part of the experience.
I wish we could, but we can't.
Yeah.
So,
Nope, they're not going to tell us everything.
Yeah.
But we certainly keep trying.
We keep trying. That's right. That's right.
Keep asking. We always, I always tell people you can keep asking and say, show me what I need to know. That always, opens up, but in its own timing.
Yes.
Can't be forced.
Exactly.
That's right.
So when you went to university, you said that you have always written, you've always been a writer, but you also kind of took a detour, I guess, as a business executive for quite a while before you became a published author. Is that correct?
Yeah, I did. Part of my intention was to be self-supporting. I knew that writing was going to require funds, and I didn't want to have to depend on somebody or, marry a rich man or, run after anybody else for money because that's not the kind of person I am. And so I started working in international business, and I was traveling 265 days a year to the US, once a month to the US, the UK, Canada, from the French Riviera. So, I remember going into my office sometimes when I was on the rare moments that I was in my office in France at Sofiane-Table. It's a beautiful place. And I remember one morning going and sitting down and trying to buckle my seatbelt in my office chair.
Wow. That's a lot of travel.
That's
wait.
when it clicks. Yeah. Oh, I need to slow down a little bit.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where were you in the south of France?
I was in Antibes, which is one of the most beautiful places in the world. I had a sea view apartment of the old town of Antibes with the Picasso Museum, the port. There's a beautiful Fort Carré by Vauban. It was just exquisite. It was also extremely materialistic. So, that was another experience that I had.
Well, wasn't that sort of an origin of your Riviera stories?
It was, yeah, it was. Because I saw so many people looking for something more and thinking they're going to find it in, another Ferrari or another hit song. I met lots of people who were, rock stars and millionaires. It was a different lifestyle.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
I smile every time I hear you say France in English because we've hosted a lot of exchange students since we've been to Europe quite a lot. And one of our students who was from Brussels, her father just cracked up every time we said France, and he's like, "It's France."
France, yes.
And he thought it was hysterical when we would say France, and he'd always make fun, France.
Yeah.
Americans do take the most beautiful languages
And
will lay them flat.
And just crinkle it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So were you doing some of the writing as you were jetting all around the world doing this business work, or did you kind of hold off on that?
Yeah, I thought I could. I was often weekends stuck in either Montreal or someplace in the US or sometimes in the UK, sometimes in France. And I had jet lag. I had constant jet lag because it takes about 10 days to recuperate. So every month I was going to the US, Canada, and the UK. There were either 6 or 7 hours difference with the US, 6 hours with Canada usually, and 1 hour difference with the UK from the usual time zone that I was at in the French Riviera. So, I had the desire to sit down in Canada. I remember one day in Canada when I was in Montreal for the weekend and sitting at this beautiful desk looking out, from the high-rise hotel that I was at. And I'm going to write this morning, and just, it just was not possible. I just did not have the energy and the space to be able to do it, just for that constant jet lag.
But you were able to retire, I guess, early enough to be able to start a whole different profession, really, in your writing and your intuitive work. And
I made a whole lifestyle change. So I put money aside, made some investments, and also, shifted from buying Hermes scarves to, just living a simpler lifestyle.
For sure.
Wow.
And so now you work intuitively with other writers. You do workshops and things like that. What do you have a favorite? Like, what is your favorite thing of all of the different things that you do, or is it hard to pick?
So I work with some writers right now. I'm very picky working with writers because, well, I won't go into that, but there has to be the right motivation. If it's about I want to write a book because I want to be famous and make a lot of money, that's I'm not the right person. I'm not the right fit for that. Um, for people who want to use their inner guidance to bring forward and to be of service information for humanity to help people, I'm the right person for that book. You know that.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
So I do work with some writers. It's relatively exclusive. I do writing and intuition to create a space for people to be able to learn to access these higher states of consciousness so that they can tap into that space to write from. So that's one of the things I do. I've been working much more with individual intuitive sessions because many people just want, just give me the information.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And on rare occasions, I will consult people because I need some support, in having more clarity about making a business decision or something like that. Not very often, because usually I get the guidance. So that's one thing I do. And it's a very, like I said before we were starting, it's a space where I tap into the field of oneness. We're in that field of oneness. It's not about me. I don't have anything to prove. If nothing comes, nothing comes. And I'll say, okay, there's nothing there. Because we just don't know what source wants to bring through for
Yes.
that individual person. If it's not my personal experience and it's not my opinion. So, it's really important for me that people know that because many people, when they go to a reader, whether it's tarot or something else, it's a different experience and it's coming from a different place. And so people will have the experience and it's so natural and so easy in the sense that it just comes and I'll give them information about um, there are people come for many different reasons, whether it's for personal relationships, guidance about personal situations. I work with business directors, university center directors, artists. It's all people come for many, many different reasons, and there is no one size fits all.
Right.
So that's super interesting in itself. And for me as a writer, I get to see human nature in all of its different facets. And so I find that hugely fascinating. Um, so for me, the information comes in direct. Sometimes I'll see images and hear words, but very often it's just direct information. So it's a really fascinating experience and it has evolved and continues to evolve. And so people will come back to me, sometimes 10 days later, sometimes a couple of years later and say, exactly what you said happened. And I always tell people it's not telling the future, it's talking about potentials that are there. And it's up to you whether you modify that, to amplify it or diminish it if it's something you don't want to happen. So, it's really, really clear. If people don't understand that, then most people do, because it's a very particular type of person who will do sessions with me. It's not people who are wanting me to tell them about the future in this sort of glossy sort of way. It's very specific.
Exactly. And so it sounds like you have what we call claircognizance, just this sort of knowing. But in that, it's so interesting because, there are always multiple timelines running at the same time anyway. And so it's about kind of the most probable timeline that you're tapping into, for example. And depending upon their free will choice, determines what actually happens. And, by virtue of the fact that you are getting this information as a client, that also can change the outcome, right? And that's the whole point. So if you go to a palm reader or whatever, a card reader, and she goes, oh, I see an accident in a year or whatever, okay, then you're going to change all of these steps trying to prevent some accident or whatever. So It's
But it's
tricky science.
yeah, it's not about telling people there's going to be an accident because that's planting seeds where people can actually make that happen,
Right.
right?
No,
Because
I
it's
don't think that's
uncomfortable.
best practice at all, but it's just a funny stereotype of going to somebody and they tell you, oh, you're going to die or there's something happening.
Yeah, no, this is
Kind
very
of.
specific. It's very specific. So let me give you some examples, and I have permission, and also I change details as well. So one person, this is a friend who was very skeptical. So it's a friend more than a client. Sometimes he's a client, but he prefers to chat with me over dinner, you know. So
Right.
We have some
whereas
of those.
Yeah, we have a few of those too.
you guys know what I mean.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So we were in the car going out for dinner, and he was talking about he's a very wealthy businessman, and he was talking about a project where he needed some chemical suppliers. I don't know what the chemicals were. I didn't ask. I just said, give me the name and where they're located. He had two that he had in mind, and immediately got the pros and cons for both. And as I finished the second one, I said, and again, it's not my experience, it's not my opinion. I said, there's a third one. You need to look in a country. It starts with an S. It may be Slovenia. No, it's Slovakia. There's a country, there's a supplier in that country, Slovakia, where it's going to be absolutely exactly what you're looking for. And he says, okay. And I'm like, oh, that was interesting.
Mm.
Okay. And he contacted me like 10 days later, and he said, I checked Slovakia, and I found exactly the right supplier for my chemicals, and it was exactly what you said.
Wow.
You know? It's not always that specific, but often it is. I never know. It's different for everybody.
Yeah.
I feel like almost for him, since he's such a skeptic, that the universe is playing with him, and they want him to see that there's a bigger picture and that things are much more beyond the material realm. So that's something that I suspect because, go ahead.
Sometimes skeptics are the best clients, frankly. Because
Yeah.
the ones that come to you, they're easy. Yes, that if they already understand and believe, they're easier. But when you can blow the mind of a skeptic, it's kind of like, wow, it's like night and day.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was funny because at his birthday party recently, his, business colleagues, friends, he says, oh, and this is Debra. And he told exactly that story.
Yeah.
That's why I could tell it.
Well, that leads into a question. So it answered part of my question that I was going to ask, but you're doing this intuitive work in the region of the world that you're in. Is it fairly, accepted, or is it something that still is kind of on the edges? Here in the U.S., UK probably more so, but here in the U.S., we still kind of, there's still pockets that are like, no, that's, Christianity, where it goes against Christianity, that kind of thing. So where you're at, is it accepted, or do you do a lot of stuff over Zoom, or how that kind of thing?
So I have clients all over. Tasmania, Los Angeles, all over. So it's really interesting. Tasmania, sometimes the connections are not so good because it's so remote. But really all over. And I find that the universe brings the right people. People who are interested always find me. And somebody will say, a lot of it's word of mouth. Somebody say, you need to go see Debra. And I find that really interesting. And in Switzerland, people are quite open to that. Part of it is because it's so multicultural. It's 4 languages here. It's really international. Geneva, you hear English almost more than any other language because of all the big international organizations like the UN and all these huge organizations. So it's a very international country, and people are quite in many ways they're quite open. You have both. You've got both people who are quite narrow and close, and also those who are really open. So it's kind of the way the world is in general right now. We're living on all these different levels. People are at such different levels. And I don't mean that in terms of any sort of judgmental way, but in terms of almost like dimensions. We're almost in like different dimensions. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's just such an interesting time right now. So in any case, I don't find that there are issues in the little village in France. People will come to me when they have a lost cat or a lost dog, So I'm like the local sort of,
Right, right. Okay.
That's funny. I love that.
Yeah.
isn't it? It's really funny.
When you are teaching workshops or helping people to understand intuition, how it works and how they can tap into their own intuition, how, it's often very subtle, particularly in the beginning. So how do you teach them to trust what's coming in?
Yeah, thanks for that question. That's a good one. So just to follow on from the intuitive sessions, my all-time preferred thing is to teach people I don't think it's like meditation. You can't teach somebody to meditate. You can create experiences and support and give them pointers. So my all-time favorite thing is to encourage people to use their own inner guidance system, because with that, that's where we're going as humanity overall in the future. You guys already know that. So the way I do it is multi-layered, let's say. So there's the layer of them being able to tune in to me and my abilities. That's a natural. So whenever we're in a field together, we're in the field, right? And they can tune in. So, it's like with anything. Whenever you're with a very wealthy businessman, if you want to learn about how to make more money, you just tune into his energy field and his frequency, right? And you pick up the frequency. So it's kind of that's what I encourage people to do with the intuition. So that's one level. Another level is to create, first of all, do presentations where people can actually try to see. I try to put into words some of the experiences that people can have so that they can begin to open their expectation to the potentials. I love to talk about energy, subtle energy, and thought forms, because that, to me, those are some of the that's the big language to learn that most people have suppressed or repressed or trying to ignore. And it's really hugely important because it's there. Most people will pick it up, even though it's not conscious, and they'll suppress it. So the language of energy, to me, is another one of the languages that I speak, or let's say comprehend. And so I really focus on getting people to become conscious of, how do I feel? What's going on here? Where am I at in my body? Am I present in my body? Can I feel my feet? Am I connected to the earth? Am I conscious of what's going on in the room? Am I conscious of colleagues when they come into the office? And do I feel that energy field? Do I feel the energy field of the cat that comes in? So it's really starting to get people to become aware of the subtle rather than the material, because that's where the information comes from. And along with that, it's really important for people to begin to set the intention to want to work with intuition and to trust that it's developing a relationship with your inner guidance system. And it's also about helping people to begin to understand. I'm just having a shift of energy. It's funny. This is my usual meditation time, so it's like I'm just feeling the energy shift.
Interesting.
It's a little bit distracting sometimes. I don't know if you guys get that sometimes. Just it's like coming in and going out. So in any case, okay, so it's helping people to remember what values they want to work with, set their values, and to begin to consciously put those in practice. So those are aspects of that as well. So. And also doing the experiences. We do the guided meditation, so people can start to tune in and feel the shifts as well. So did that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Yes,
Thank you for
yes,
that. That's
yes.
helpful because our audience ranges from new seekers to some practitioners. And so we're always curious about certain topics, dark nights of the soul, for example, or how to trust yourself, how to release outcomes. Those types of things are important.
Another thing that helps is I do an intuition circle so that people can be in a circle of other people and they ask good questions. It's very supportive. It's not competition. It's just really people really wanting to learn about how to work with intuition. And we meet twice a month. Once is a Q&A session, once is a training session. And it's very much about, in that circle, people grow and develop together. And that's super interesting as well. So that's the other aspect, having a supportive community. So just wanted to add that before you move on.
I'm glad that you did, because you do offer that on your website, and people
Yeah,
come
definitely.
and sign up for that if they want to be a part of that community. Everybody needs a tribe, really. You need somewhere where you can go to feel like you can have these conversations and practice and all of that, rather than feeling like you're in isolation.
Yeah, really. Mm.
As you went along and you had written some books, and eventually you decided to create a publishing company, Divinely Inspired Books, which is beautiful because your Unity show is Divinely Inspired Living, and you literally embody divinely inspired living and creating and all of that sort of thing. And our intersection was divinely, I mean, everything was divinely inspired, and I love that name. But at what point did you decide that you wanted to become a book publisher, or how did that come about?
So I did that for a little while and then decided to close it. That was not working for me as a way to move forward. I was guided to focus more on my own books and to focus on developing more intuition and supporting people in discovering their own intuition. That's really the most important moving forward. So that was a learning experience, let's say.
Right. See, this is fascinating to us because we also were kind of called to start a publishing company, to publish our own books at first, but then also to help other people get their metaphysical or spiritual experiences, their gift to the world out. And so it's been fairly successful, but we've thought to ourselves, you know, it takes a heck of a lot of time. This is very time consuming, working with authors and trying to get their voice and all of this. And we thought we could do this, but we'd have to put all of our attention into that. And I'm not sure that that's what we want to do. So we're still trying to do some part-time juggling and have our clients and do other things and write. And so I wonder if that call or that guidance will come to us at some point too. Shift away from that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I found that exact same thing. It was so time consuming, very, very demanding. And that was not my final mission. It was useful.
Yeah.
It is. What did you
stepping
learn?
stone, yeah.
What did you learn from that, besides the fact that it's time consuming?
The main one was it is time consuming. Yeah, and that, you know, it was a nice idea, but just not where I'm supposed to put my time and energy. And you know, that's okay. In the experience in this time frame that we're in, everything is so accelerated that we're being given lots of things to do, and so we can learn and move forward. And that was just one of them. So, you know, to me, it's not about. There isn't a question really of failure. It's everything for me is about this learning process, and I will never stop learning. So it was just one of them.
And ultimately trusting your own guidance that you're getting, because
Totally.
guidance is pointing you in one direction. And so many of us look at the opportunities that are given to us that it's kind of like the end all be all opportunity. So we have to stick with it. Well, it might be just a stepping stone to get you to the next greatest thing. And
Totally. And it's the same with intuitive guidance. I want to come back to that because many people will take I always tell people this is a snapshot of right now. Everything is changing really, really quickly, you know, so you have to stay tuned in for yourself and make your decisions accordingly, because so many people will go and see a reader of something or another, and they'll say, well, that person told me 5 years or 10 years ago that I was going to meet such and such a person, going to be this way. I'm like, 5 or 10 years ago? Do you know how things are accelerating right now?
Yeah.
Well, it's probably way gone. You need to revise and, you know, come back to the present. So
that's three timelines ago. So yeah, we've jumped over a couple of, you know, since then.
Exactly. So just to come back to what you were saying, Will, it's really important that people understand that something that was really important, just as relationships were really important, it's really important to check in and see, you know, is this still right for me? Is this still the right thing for me to do moving forward? And, you know, there are sometimes when that huge soul response is going to be yes, and other times when it might be, well, maybe we'll see, you know, and then there are other times when it's something else. So many people are still in that old time frame where, you know, it was like this before, so I need to stay in this box before. And it's not okay to change. And that's just doing a disservice to our own soul mission and our own soul guidance that we need to really be paying attention to.
I'm
So,
going to play this part for my husband.
Okay.
I know I'm just very entrepreneurial, and everything that I've done has contributed to my wealth of knowledge I have now, and the people that I've met and the experiences that I've had. It's all accumulative, and but he looks back at my past and he's just like, well, you were doing this, and then you did this, and then you did this, and I'm like, but like my spiritual stuff has been a constant all the way through. And so I just keep reminding him, but I have been doing something consistently, but I see opportunities here, and then the opportunity starts to go south, and you can feel the energy. You have
That's
to be
it.
willing to go, okay, this is not plugging away. It's not doing, he's like, no, you just have to persevere if you just stay with it. And I'm like, no, the energy, it's dying off. It's just time to move on.
exactly. That's hugely important because a lot of light workers, a lot of people who did massage who are really burned out after the COVID thing, they're really burned out also in 22, 23 because they were healing people who had the traumas based on the, all the stuff that was going on. They don't notice that it's not in alignment with who they are and their life mission anymore. And it's the same with relationships. Sometimes I'll feel where people are like they're like, there are moments where it's going to come back together. And then sometimes I just feel and just see that they're just there's no longer any alignment whatsoever. And it just takes a few moments of just tuning in energetically to get that.
Yeah.
And most people already know.
Yeah.
Most people already know, but don't want to face the discomfort and they're in a what do I call it? I call it an uncomfortable comfort zone.
That's a good way to put it.
Comfortable comfort zone. I love that.
And they don't want to move into that uncomfortable unknown, which is going to be really exciting and bring all these amazing opportunities. And so,
Yeah, so often in our client sessions, the higher self will come through and say, she already knows the answer to this question, but they need the confirmation,
Yeah.
Or
They
the
do.
permission.
permission.
Yeah, or the permission.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Mm.
But I like what you said about how accelerated the timelines are right now. This is so, and Cryon talks about this a lot. And you actually introduced me to Cryon years and years ago. I don't know if you follow Cryon anymore, but he's really neat. But he talks about how people who have plugged away for 40 years as an astrologer or a Reiki practitioner or whatever they were doing, and it was slugging through the density of 3D, but it's not like that anymore. So all of that stuff is, so you could all of a sudden start speaking light language or get guidance to create this new modality. And again, these higher selves are coming through and telling us it's time to create a new book on how we see the angelics or create a new book on the chakra system, because all of that old energy was good at the time, but it's time for a new understanding and a new integration of all of these things.
Just update the language. I mean, it's a revision. It's not getting rid of all the old teachings. It's just revising it for today's
To
energy.
meet people where they
Right.
are now.
Right. Today's energy flow, which like we're saying is advancing so much quicker, and we have to kind of stay up with it. So it's
What I see is a lot of people who have done trainings, or some of these people you're talking about, astrologers or people who were, in healing professions, whether it's massage or whatever. They have a lot of experience, and they've been stuck in these old modalities that are in lower density, and they feel quite heavy. And I see that they have the capacities to bring in something higher and something different. And this has happened over and over again. And all they need to do is trust and just allow it to evolve, but not to stay stuck in that modality with the language, like you said, Will, and to stay in that box, because that does not work anymore. It just doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work for them. It doesn't work for clients. People know when the energy is stale and there's nothing new coming through, right?
Well, and so, I just want to clarify this for anyone listening to. So in your experience and what is coming through, what's being channeled or, intuitively brought through, it sounds like you're saying that you're feeling the energies of astrology, casting or whatever, and massage therapy, are you saying that those are starting to become
No.
enhancer energy? Okay, that's why I wanted
No,
to
no, no, no,
clarify.
no,
I
no.
wasn't sure.
What I'm saying is there are people who are in the healing professions, in astrology, they're sticking to old ways of addressing that and approaching it.
They're not
And they're
open
not,
to new modality or new influences of energy coming through there.
Right.
what I'm seeing is that they are getting, it's like all they have to do is just open a little bit and it's like right there, they're getting access, if they open to it, to all this amazing new information and the new approaches that will add another layer to what they've been doing and completely shift the energy of it, which will be beneficial for everybody. The client, for them. Does that make sense? Was that clear?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
and we've had conversations. And in fact, we just interviewed someone and it reminded me of the conversation about labels. Like before it was easy to say, oh, I'm a massage therapist, or, I do, work with oils or whatever it is. And now it's like everyone does numerous things. Like
It's a blending of modalities.
yeah.
What do I
It's,
call, the question is, what do I call myself? Well, you don't need to
Well,
call yourself anything.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I
tell
hear
people,
elements kind of, yeah.
I tell people, I mean, it has come through several times that they need to name their own modality
Right.
and give a new name to it. I mean, it's come through, it's so many times that I've had that, especially here in Switzerland. There are a lot of people very gifted, but they need to, it's like an aperture on a camera. You just need to open up and all that information. I see it, I feel it. It's just like, open up, it's right there, dudes.
We've had a number of clients hire Selves say the exact same thing, is that, you already have the tool sets of these other things.
It's
Now-
a good foundation.
Now kind of break away the barriers and make it your own. Call it your own thing.
Exactly.
Because
Exactly.
you just, and like you said, it's trusting that intuitive aspect of yourself. You feel it while you're working in it, but because you're kind of constrained by the box, you're not going to bring that intuitive aspect into it, because that isn't how I was trained. That's all kind of washing away, and it's this beautiful, beautiful space.
But someone who has, like, you have a wider vocabulary given all the different languages that you speak. Like I look at the English language and I feel like, because you're trying to choose a label that expresses this melange of
vastness
things
of-
that you're
right,
doing,
right.
but there's not, but you want to choose a word that would instantly convey to someone that this is what it
Yeah,
means.
true.
And there isn't such a thing as that. Like, so I don't think we have the vocabulary, but I know that there's more to choose from, I believe, in the, the romantic languages.
You think?
I
Think.
would say use telepathy.
Right.
I like that.
No, because the thing with the modalities that people are they're in the process of developing something new that doesn't have a label yet, and it's experiential and it needs new words for it. So I would say we don't have the words for it, but we do have telepathy. So all you have to do is just tune in telepathically and pick it up. But that is coming. We are developing that more and more.
For sure.
Right, because the
People are
picture
feeling
paints 1,000 words, and our guides tell us all the time, the minute you give your guide a name or ask for a specific, like, are you a Pleiadian or are you an angel or whatever you are, it completely puts them in a box at that point. And so the whole idea of labeling in the first place is restricting. And that's why this idea of downloads of information telepathically communicated is way better than trying to get the verbiage correct.
Yeah.
Well,
And that,
it's for this to think about.
Yeah.
I mean, the only reason we want to put a name or a picture behind something or a label is so that we feel comfortable. It's that comfort
give it
zone.
a construct.
Right. It's that comfort zone that you speak of.
Well, and to categorize.
Well, yeah.
Because then we can, like in my mind, I have to put something to it. So I feel like I need to do that, to place it somewhere so that I know where to retrieve it.
understand it, right.
Yeah. Even though, got to find new ways of doing things.
Right.
yeah, I feel like it's more about frequency now. So all you have to do is sow that frequency into what you're doing, into the marketing, into the label, and more and more people are going to get the frequency, right? And they're going to be attracted to the frequency.
Well, and I
That's
actually
how it works
felt
for me.
that, yeah, that it was
Mm.
that marketing is breaking away from the, the whole you got to build a better mousetrap, and that it's if you simply put out that frequency of it, that people will come, and like that kept coming through, and I was like, and I'm a marketing person, I'm kind of going, okay, how does that work? Even though I'm an intuitive, it's still like,
Yeah, it's the consciously bringing that frequency into, whatever we're building, whether it's the website, the graphics, all of that stuff, and the label, whatever label we put on it, it's about that frequency.
I love that.
So your most recent work, changing subjects here briefly, is Girl on the Roof. Is that correct? That was the last.
That was a book. Yeah, that was a novel. Very unusual, very unexpected for me.
It was fantastic. It's a thriller. It's historical. It's got a lot of metaphysical concepts thrown in. It's really, really good. You got to pick that up if you all haven't read that yet. Do you have anything in the works now? Are you working on any other novels or nonfiction or?
So I was working on a romantic comedy set in Charleston, South Carolina when The Girl on the Roof came in. I was like, wow, this is not Charleston, South Carolina.
Right. Are you going back to that?
So I love it. I'm not sure whether I will be, what the timing is going to be for. It's finished. It's more about timing of doing the polishing takes a lot of time, actually, the editing and the polish. So there's the oneness connection, which is really important for me right now because it's to me, that's the essence of everything. All the things that we're talking about, everything is coming from the field or source or whatever you want to call that,
Right.
And it's moving beyond the words, like you were talking about, Samantha, moving beyond the boxes and the labels and moving into the space of experience, of experiencing the person who was with me, not looking at the labels, and it's about doing this in a practical way, doing it spiritually, doing it, in every aspect of one's life. For me, the information that comes to me is from that field of oneness. It's not about me. It's about supporting. It reacts based on my intention, which is to be of support and to be of service. And we can live daily life like that. In my book, Garden of Bliss, I wrote about one experience of the oneness, which was I was in the Alps coming back from a hike, and I love animals, especially birds. And I heard the most beautiful bird on a branch. I was coming back from this beautiful long hike. And I stopped and I started listening. And in an instant, I felt the bird's heartbeat. It was my heartbeat. It was one and the same. And in that instant that my mind became conscious of it, it shook me back. And the bird felt it and flew away, startled. And that's oneness, but without the mental. So you can stay in that space without the mind. And my cat just came in and started talking about the birds.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. We have a couple of cats as well.
Yeah.
So
you did the first book was Awaken in the World, correct?
Awaken the World.
Awaken the World. So when you did that, you were looking at all the different religious practices, I guess, throughout the world.
Spiritual practices, not religious.
Were there any that really stood out to you for our audience that would be helpful or beneficial for them to try, that you felt were really, that just stood out as more profound?
So I think it depends on the person and where they're at, right? That's part of the reason there are 108 practices.
Yeah. There's something for everybody, 108 of them.
Right.
Well, people will tell me they would just open it and pick the one for the day. To me, one of the most important things is I'm hearing getting grounded for people right now, because one of the issues that people really have with social media and going out into the world, the way things connect with us, they connect really at the head level, right? And when we're not in our bodies, I see so many people who energetically they're just not in their body. They may be kind of up here and out there. they're only in their bodies up to their knees, but from the knees down, they're disconnected, I mean, how I look, scan people a little bit, just see, I see it with clients all the time. So that, just getting grounded practice is really, really important. And it's really easy and simple. Just bringing the conscious focus to the feet and that beautiful connection with Mother Earth. It's as simple as that. And that's a big one. The 1 minute meditation is really important if people are in work environments or in an office environment where there's a lot of distraction, a lot of noise, or anytime. That's just really important. Everything, I would say many of the practices have even changed since then, because just being conscious right now is super important. I was at there was a village festival yesterday, and everybody was at a table outside, and it was windy, really wild wind, and people were chatting, and I was starting to feel really anxious and agitated. And then I went, okay, what's going on here? And just being conscious of the wind, because if we're in our mind focusing on the words, we're not having the bigger experience of what's going on with the wind, with the people talking louder, with the agitation that's going on. So just being conscious in the moment for me is the most important thing right now. That consciousness right now of, how am I feeling? What's going on here? What's going on in my body? Am I breathing? Is there something else happening in the room? Is there background noise? Is somebody's energy very distracting? That's for me one of the most important practices right now. Just being conscious right here, right now.
Right.
Wow.
Staying in the now and being aware.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe you have to ask questions. What's going on here? And just I'm feeling uncomfortable. What's going on? Is it mine? Is it out there? Or is it something in here? That's a big one, because a lot of people will, if there's fear or irritation or agitation, it's often out there, especially, I know you guys are all empaths and very insensitive. And many people are, especially if they're listening to the podcast and to the show. And a lot of what's going on is not about what's in here. It's about what's going on out there. And one of the things I talk about a lot is the thought energies, the energies of emotions. There's these clouds, these huge clouds of fear, anxiety. During the lockdowns in France, there were these huge clouds of fear, and people were just in a state of total panic, and that was what was going on, were the clouds of fear. And so it's really important every moment to ask, what's mine and what's going on out there, and to be conscious.
That's exactly right. And one of the things that we stress on this show is about understanding your own baseline, like tuning into yourself every day, so whether it's yours or whether it's, because if you don't know what you normally feel like, then you don't know what it feels like to be discordant.
Totally. Yeah, I call it home base. That's fun. You call it baseline. I call it home base. That's really great. So it's one of the things I encourage in the intuition circle, because if you want to listen to your intuition, you've got to know, what's in here and what's out there and what's my intuition talking to me, right? And so, having just a few moments in the morning to just do a meditation and then write down, how am I feeling today? What's going on today? And then again in the evening, just to keep that going, or a few minutes during the day if possible, do those check-ins. Yeah, very much in alignment with that.
This has been a marvelous conversation, and you have just such a wealth of gifts and abilities, and so there are a lot of things that you can help clients with. Tell us some of the things that people would want to contact you for or reach out to you, all of the different things. We've kind of touched on them throughout, but.
Yeah. So if people need, let's say if they need quick answers, so to speak, and don't have time to, take 6 months or a couple of years to develop your intuitive connections, then that's really useful. It's, like I said, it's not telling the future. It's really tuning into what's going on in the moment. It's a snapshot, and it just brings in a lot of information, whether it's for, sometimes people have legal proceedings. Sometimes, sometimes things come through, it can be quite surprising. So that's one thing. People want to develop their intuition. The intuition circle is a great way to do that. And then I'm starting again starting September. Did one in August as well. Intuition and writing. So there are two facets to that. It's being able to use that energy that comes in for developing intuitive insights and listening and writing it down. And it's also for being able to use that energy that comes in for creative development of a project or whatever, and also being able to anchor it using an expanded state of awareness. So it's a guided meditation to get into these higher states of awareness.
It's
I
amazing.
love that because it's so important to not force. We want to do something or create
the
a book,
flow.
write a book, all of that. But it's better to let it come. It's already inside.
Yeah.
Just let it be birthed through you, through that energetic connection. That's fantastic. I love it.
Yep.
Gosh, Deborah, this was so much fun. You have no idea how excited I am to finally connect again.
It's really, really cool. Yeah,
Face to
really
face.
amazing.
Yeah, it's awesome. So thank you so much for spending your time with us today.
My pleasure.
And to all of our audience members, thank you for spending time with us on Out on a Limb podcast. Hit that thumbs up, please. Subscribe, share away, and we will see you next time.
See y'all.
Bye.